Welcome everybody, and also a thank you to Ward for putting on the event. Really, really appreciate what you do for our community and the opportunity to get together in this pretty unique and special forum. So thank you so much. All right, so we are kicking off the collaboration zone today with a discussion about, we titled it Beyond the Hype of Employee Experience and Engagement. And just to give you a little bit of an overview of the topics that we may end up discussing it really for the next hour until the top of the hour when we have our first official presenter beyond our panel, is we want to talk a little bit about the struggle. Right, what really is happening with employers? In fact, if we think about this session here today, we may not get off of this. We may not leave this first bullet point, because I think sometimes in the solution provider community, in those of us who travel with the SaaS providers and the services providers in the space, we want to believe that we are the final solution to the elixir for the pain, and unfortunately I don't think that is the case. And so we want to talk really a little bit deeper on that, and really wander more deeply into the very important topic of employee experience, employee engagement, and employee engagement. And so hopefully this will help set the stage for what we're going to end up seeing today, as we have an opportunity to listen to some up and coming presentations from the solution provider community to provide feedback and input on what we're seeing, and also have an opportunity to listen to some thought leadership sessions as well. So just previewing of the day. But yeah, we're gonna wander through these topics, and joining me on, or maybe just a little bit about me. I am Marilyn Pearson Hendrix. Everyone knows me as MPH, miles per hour. It works in the US because we have never gotten around to the metric system. If we do, I have to change my first name to something that begins with a K. I have dedicated my career to supporting founders and the senior leadership teams on go-to-market. And so, but that is not where I began my career at all. I spent my first decade in HR as a practitioner, and that never leaves me for a moment. And so had the opportunity to then join software companies back in the mid-90s, and went through a long journey that led to where I'm at today, which is really the intersection of business transformation, technology, and really bringing all of that together to solve real problems in our world. So making the world safer, integrated talent management. Joining me today, we have two guests in our collaboration zone. We've got Cindy Olson, who is the co-founder of the Executive Strategic Alliance. And we also have Mark Pfeffer, who is editor of Recruiting Daily and also the HCM Technology Report. So what I'd like to do right now is turn over the mic to Cindy for a proper introduction. And then Cindy, when you're done, if you could pass that over to Mark, and then we'll begin our panel.
Thanks, Marilyn, and thanks, Ward, for having me here today. I got to really start with my background so you can understand why ESA, why we founded ESA, and really why I'm interested in this discussion. But 20 years ago, I can't believe it's been 20 years ago, I was the CHRO of Enron and on the 20-person executive committee. And at the time, Enron was the most innovative company in the world, and it also was Fortune 7. And our peers were like Goldman and JP Morgan Chase and some of the bigger companies. What Raylyn said, I was not career HR. In fact, I was running the back office of Enron Capital and Trade for Jeff Skilling when I was asked to come to corporate to run community relations by Kinlay. And during the process of having that responsibility, I got involved in diversity, and I got involved in our culture group that we had across the organization. And then we started really trying to recruit traders from New York, and had a hard time doing that, and realized that we were becoming an intellectual capital company, and HR was not keeping up. So I had worked side by side with McKinsey for 20 years, transforming business group organizations. And I went to Jeff Skilling and Kinlay and said, I want to run HR. because I don't think that HR is doing what it needs to do around our talent needs and running the business. And they let me do that, put me on the executive committee. And side by side with McKinsey, we built the first HCM. We were on an SAP ERP. We knew that we needed an HR module. It wasn't there at the time. And so we built the technology that we then shopped or sold to Goldman Sachs American Express as a managed services. And I believed in that, as did the CHROs of the financial services companies, because we as CHROs had to focus on talent and culture. So 20 years later, I posted on LinkedIn that everybody knows the bad stuff about Enron. We don't even have to go over that. But I was helping John Eschmiller of the Wall Street Journal do his latest podcast, Bad Bets. And in the process, I realized that there were a lot of people within Enron that wanted to tell the story and never could. And so on LinkedIn, I asked everyone to look, we've heard that everybody's told our story for us. We all know the bad stuff, but I'd love to hear from the employees what they thought of the employee experience that we had at Enron. And many, many people said, I never found it again. This is what you get when you take bright people and give them the resources to build things. It was the best place in the world. I learned everything that I used in my career. And it was clear to me, and many people said I hit a nerve, right? And so I believed at the time that we had created the employee experience of the future and the best in the business that at that time, and that kind of validated that. And in the meantime, I tried to figure out, as all 20 of us did, there were 20 of us that were at the very top of Enron. None of us could work again in business. So we all tried to figure out what we could do to use our experience to help other people. And that's why I founded ESA. And what we do at ESA is we bring together the CHROs and the CIOs, because I believe that both of those functions have got to work hand in hand to be able to provide that employee experience. And we really focus around bringing thought leadership like McKinsey, like Deloitte, like Hackett, the people that really are looking at the vision of where everything is going. Marcus Buckingham was just on our as our thought leader last month. And so that the CHROs and CIOs have a vision for the future, and then be able to bring in companies like the technology companies to operationalize how you get there. So we provide great thought leadership. We also provide a kind of a Shark Tank work tech startup group where startups come to our executives and present, and our executives give them feedback because they're the future buyers of those HR work tech technologies. And we just launched a board readiness program where we help our executives go to other companies and help those companies also get on boards and be able to bring that influence in the IT and the HR world to the boards of those other companies. So that's what I did, and that's what I do. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the employee experience, because it is critical right now to be able to retain talent and attract talent. Mark.
Thank you, Cindy. That's great. Mark.
Hello, I'm Mark Pfeffer, and I really take a journalist's view of HR technology and HR in general. I don't have an HR background, unless you count my wife, who's a recovering organizational psychologist. But I have been writing for 10 or 12 years about HR in recruiting and technology. The reason I got into this is it just struck me as being very fast moving, very creative, and very interesting segment of the technology market that nobody really appreciates. Some of the smartest people I've met are working on product development at recruiting platforms or HCM platforms or what have you. Just for biographical purposes, I started at Dow Jones. I worked there for 10 years. I was the managing editor of DICE for 8 years. And then I left DICE to start the HCM Technology Report, which last year was acquired by Recruiting Daily. So I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people in the field. And one of the things that's remarkable is how many common threads there are in the conversation. There's a lot of consensus on some of the big issues that go on in HR technology. Often people are just sort of arguing about the details. But that's it. That's me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark and Cindy, and really, again, appreciate your participation in today's discussion. And so with that, an area that we may not even move on from in terms of our topics, which are quite ambitious for our time allotment, but let's talk a little bit about why are employers struggling with employee experience and employee engagement? What is the root cause of this? What is your view? Cindy, do you want to kick us off?
This one. So in our executive alliance, we have a lot of large company, MasterCard, Tyson Foods, Southwest Airlines, CHROs, and we really talk about the issues. And the employee experience, I think people are struggling with because it's so broad. It's not about certain technology. It's not even about just about your culture, but it's really how do you bring in the best talent in the world? How do you develop that talent so they can really go anywhere in the world they want, and then how do you keep them? And really, that's the employee experience. It has to do with technology, yes. It has to do with culture, yes. It's really hard because it is so it encompasses so much. And when Enron was on the Fortune's most innovative company for the 6th year in a row, Ken was asked by many CEOs across the country, how did you create that culture, that amazing innovative culture? And it was 12 areas that I can say today are the same 12 areas. And I got to go out and educate those executive teams on how you do that. The reason it's so hard for organizations is because there's so many elements to it, I think. And I can go into more on certain aspects of it, but I think it's just so large that people they really can't get their arms around it.
That's really, really good observation. Mark, what are you seeing? Where are you seeing the struggle?
Well, I think there's a couple. One is that experience is kind of like the blind man's elephant. If you know the story that 8 blind people walked up to an elephant and one put his hands on the side and he said, oh, an elephant's like a wall. Another one touched the trunk and said, oh, an elephant's like a snake. So there's a lot of people who are seeing experience and their experience problem at their company. But even within the same organization, you have disagreement about what the root causes are and what can be done to address them. I can't help but feel, this sounds cynical, but I can't help but feel in many instances, not all, but in many instances, many companies, experience is basically a buzzword, not much else. Employers know that they should be paying attention to it. They know they should be trying to give people, candidates and workers, a good experience. That takes a lot of work. It takes a significant investment. They don't want to put in the time. They don't want to put in the money. That might be changing a little bit now as we're talking about the Great Resignation. Retention's down. It's very competitive to get new talent in the door. But still, that lack of excitement, for lack of a better word, is, I think, the biggest sticking point.
Yeah,
Marilyn, can I say a couple things?
Yeah, please.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think that it is a buzzword. I kind of try and stay away from employee experience when I talk about it because, number one, it's worker experience, and there's a lot of companies that are using contract labor or freelancers in addition to their employees, and so I think it's a buzzword. I've always kind of used the employee value proposition because I think that it is so holistic. But the other thing that bothers me about employee experience is that a lot of companies, and it's not just technology companies, they come in with a solution, a point solution, and they say, we're going to improve employee experience, but then they don't really talk about how it integrates into anything else that they're doing. And it kind of all has to work together.
Right?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think most people, as they start to get into it, realize what a broad and deep issue that this is. So there's no one product that's going to solve it.
It's way more than tech.
Oh, it's
Way
absolutely way more than tech.
You're right.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah, and definitely invite those of you who are quote in the audience to participate in this discussion.
And probably
Yeah.
Marilyn, probably now it's even more, because I have come across my inbox every day an article from McKinsey more than anybody talking about it's about empathy, and it's about kind of the human experience. And I do think that's why Marcus Buckingham's new book, Love Plus Work, where he says work isn't working for us anymore, bring that love in. I think that's a big part of it. I don't think people have traditionally thought of leadership in that way. And so something just came across my desk this morning from Gartner, and they basically said you've got to provide radical flexibility within your organization. And I think companies are dipping their toe into that a little bit from a hybrid standpoint. But I think what this is saying is you need to let people decide on their own when and where they want to work. And then it also said you got to reduce the work friction. And that means really looking at the work itself and making sure that people have a say in what that work looks like for themselves. And then finally drive empathetic management. And I'm sure if people read that, they go, what is that, right? But it's really having that empathy and love and caring for your employees. Bob Chapman, in the book Everybody Matters, he talks about that as well. And I just think that's the hard part for a lot of leaders that have really never been taught that that's the way you lead.
I mean, it seems like we have to rewire how we think about employees and what it means to be an employee. We almost need to unlearn, I think about our early careers, those of us who are in the room here, and, trauma that we've been through, and beaten into submission, if you would. You will do this. You will, if you don't show up at this time exactly within 2 minutes, you are, written up, right? And obviously in some industries, that's absolutely a requirement, but where possible, where is the flexibility, and how can we be more human beings, right? But yeah, I don't know if anyone, we have a smaller group here, just invite anyone into the discussion if you're inspired to riff on this topic for a moment, if you have any thoughts.
I have a comment.
Yeah, please.
Lately around this area in Port Charlotte, I've seen really happy people working at the registers in McDonald's and Burger King, that sort of places, and really happy people, seating you at the tables and everything, because they're mentally handicapped now. And there's a lot more of them working because the other people aren't taking those jobs. And so you've got people that are thrilled and doing a fantastic job, and they're just fantastic in the job. You go in there and you're greeted happily. They're thrilled to be waiting on you and everything. And it's just, I'm seeing a lot of that. And I don't know. I think that's kind of a pretty cool thing, that if the people that aren't going to take those jobs are going to be filled by somebody who's happy in those positions, and they're doing probably a better job than the other people that would have been in those jobs otherwise.
Wouldn't it be interesting if they were actually hired because of diversity efforts, as opposed to
Necessity.
nobody else will take the
I
job?
actually think there's a lot of firms who are doing a really good job of hiring what I would call maybe alternative hires, like folks that maybe were outside of the box from what they might have been recruited into that job. But and that sort of spans across a lot of different underserved segments, military, women coming back into the workforce from maybe taking care of their children, or folks with autism. I know there's a great program at I think Success Factors has I think it's called Autism to Work or something like that, who's really tried to figure out ways of taking these hires that have skill, but maybe are being sort of overlooked for one reason or another due to a certain deficiency or some sort of, whatever, and doing a better job. I mean, like everyone, trying to find talent wherever it is. I think there's a lot of great opportunities being given to folks that need them, and certainly they're finding a place for them. So yeah,
Agreed. If you have somebody that's in a rural area, but you give them the option if they can work around your schedule, or if they can give you daycare included, or whatever it is that's particular to that particular person that makes a life change for them, you're going to get a really loyal loyal employer or employee rather.
Yeah.
Different
Flexibility is
things matter to
absolutely
different
key.
people. Watch my pit bull for the day, maybe. That could be a life changer for people. You never know what matters to people, and everyone's got their different needs that are important to them. So, free parking probably isn't as important to a lot of these people that, it used to be important to, because we don't work in offices anymore.
Yeah. So I just had a small observation, just looking at it from the employee's perspective. And, so I come from markets like India. Today, we are seeing in the tech space, attrition rates upwards of 40%. Right. So I think what's also happened is that given the situation, employees have also started taking advantage of the situation. Right. And they seem to be going to the highest bidder. Now, salaries in India, for instance, have jumped by more than 100% in a lot of tech roles. So I think given the situation, I've spoken to several CEOs of companies who run big tech firms, and they're struggling. I mean, for them, it's not about engagement or experience. It's about how do I, manage my cost structure and run a profitable business. So I think, I see a lot of employees leveraging themselves and taking advantage of the situation as well, because there is a steep curve now for attracting talent, and people are willing to pay price to the highest bidder. So that's a trend that I'm seeing in a market like India. It's probably different in some other countries, but I thought I'll just share that thought. That's why a lot of companies are struggling with, how can they engage their employees?
Yeah, but why shouldn't they?
Yeah, Ben Eubanks from Lighthouse Research also just I guess he hasn't even released it yet, a report on the candidate experience from the job seeker. And one of his slides yesterday that he presented was, I think it was like top 7 things or something that candidates wanted. Number 1 is pay transparency at the beginning of the interview process. So, which also leads into number 2, which is speed in the process. And number 3 was knowing their status. And that status was either weekly or immediately. And whatever else, who cares? Those are the 3. If you can't solve those 3, then you're just going to lose the experience, because those were so big. Especially, of course, it depends, but from an hourly wage standpoint, those are the big 3 issues.
Jonathan, thank you so much. Yeah, I've seen a preview of Ben's work, and he did a stunning job as well. And also a call out to the talent board, who's been really poking employers on this whole topic and has amazing research for the last decade as well. And so, and actually you bring up a really, really good point, which is a good segue into kind of our next discussion topic is, have you come across any frameworks or philosophies that if you found particularly useful, as we think about, I like, Cindy, to your point, worker experience, because it's not all in the US, we refer to the term as W2. So it's not all the people that we have supporting our businesses are not necessarily just employees. We have a whole cadre of people in different capacities, including the vendors that support our businesses as well. So, but yeah, I mean, have you come across any frameworks, philosophies that you found to be, particularly useful? Cindy, you mentioned a little bit about kind of your 12 points, if you would, that you had at Enron, and it hasn't changed.
So I think the biggest one, and this is not just me, this is the feedback that I'm hearing from the CHROs and CIOs. They don't really want more point solutions that don't integrate into everything, right? Because they want integration that's easy and not, how do I bring this in and then integrate it with my HCM or integrate it with whatever. So I've seen, I have a really strong relationship with ADP. And ADP has a marketplace that they've had for quite a while, and everything in it is integrated to their HCM. I've seen others now start to do that. And I think that it's because that's the framework that that the CHROs and CIOs are looking for, instead of using their resources to integrate everything. At least that's the feedback I'm seeing. I want to add one more thing on talent too, guys. I was just had a webinar with the CHRO of Covenant Health and Ardent Health last week, and one of the things that they said they were doing that I haven't heard, I've heard a little bit of, but it's just a way to get more talent in the door, is they're going out to their alumni and they're bringing them back in for projects or part-time jobs or whatever, because they already know the culture. And there's a lot of people that are, you know, are retired that really want to stay relevant and involved. So anyway,
The value of boomerangs.
yep, that's
Yeah.
right.
I have a
talk about that.
Oh, Jonathan, go ahead, yes. Please.
Yeah, I have a really interesting thing. So for years, everyone's been talking about the shift gig economies, about Uber and Lyft and DoorDash. And the thing that surprises me is how few people have, in our, be it HR leaders, talent leaders, no one has actually applied for a job for Uber and saw how completely different it is from how we apply for jobs in corporate America.
Right.
It is entirely automated. It is all run over text messaging. And that's how Uber hired 600,000 drivers in the US alone in 6 months in 2016. The tech's been there for 6 months, for 6 years, and corporate America is now just picking it up. But there's still, like, I show people the process. I actually signed up as an Uber driver in 2016 and a Lyft driver, and recorded the entire process and reverse engineered it. And that's what we're selling to clients. But it's just amazing that no one's actually, everyone's talking about, oh, we have to compete against shift gigs.
Right.
Well, find out what they're doing. I mean, that's how you compete against them.
It's an unlearning of a set of social behaviors that we've assumed to be normal, right?
Yep.
And we've been all, it's a shedding of skin, saying what we were raised with doesn't work anymore. You know, and Jonathan, on that note, do you know who Doug Berg is?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, serial entrepreneur in our space, original
Yep.
founder of techies.com, jobs to web, now has sold his company.
Last one, Indeed.
Yeah, he's over at Indeed now. One thing that was really interesting at a recruiting conference in Minneapolis pre-COVID is he was the guest speaker, and he basically dissected the Uber hiring process for 200 recruiters that were in the room at the headquarters of Best Buy, just a few miles away from my house. And it was like, yeah, they've never applied at their own companies, maybe.
Yeah.
and you know, for organizations that have completely disrupted the status quo, right? Yeah. And so these frameworks that we've had of what is normal and what is professional is something I see the solution provider community, instead of automating a little bit of what is considered quote normal, the ones that are game changing and just completely doing it differently are the ones that are winning. I mean, I think about Paradox and what they've brought to the marketplace in terms of, you know, the texting side of things. So and others in the space. So anyway, great. Thank you for bringing that up. That's really, really a good point. Anyway, anyone else have any thoughts, Mark, on this? Anything that you've seen?
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me about Uber is the recruiting process is very smooth. People like it, but then once you're hired, you know, once you're in there as a driver, people don't seem to like that so much. At least the drivers who I've spoken to. It's a lot of work. It's not great money. Can be a lot of pressure. So it's interesting that a company can do so well on their talent acquisition and then sort of drop the ball as soon as the person steps from the candidate pool into the worker pool.
Right.
They do
Yeah, I think
herd
that
hiring,
was
right?
I think that was part of their process, which was Literally, and this is the funniest thing about my experience with them, is you've essentially got paid $1,500 to go through that process, drive for 2 days, and record it all. You know, they gave me a big bonus and all that. That's how they started. They got people really excited about going through the process. And I did something completely unique since I was in San Francisco. Is I drove my car to the headquarters of Uber, turned on the machine or the app, picked up Uber employees as they were coming out of work, drove them home, asked them a whole bunch of questions, turned it off, went and picked up more product managers. Later in the evening, the devs would come out. And that's all I did for 2 days. And they paid me $1,500 to find out what was going on in their business.
Wow.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's the whole enchilada too. It's not just about doing a great job on attraction, it's on retention. And, you know, from a female perspective, I'll just tell you this, you know, Uber immediately comes up with, I think about the leadership structure and how they've not had a very good brand in that regard with how they've treated their female leaders and technologists. And so it wouldn't be, you know, even though they're like a premium brand, it wouldn't be a place that I would raise my hand to, you know. So, you know, you got to get all of the parts right. So, which is a point that Cindy, you brought up as well.
Yeah, I go back to that a lot, because if you really think about it, you hire the best talent in the world, and then you train them. And this is train them, develop them, let them really identify where they want to go in your company. Not you tell them, right? But develop them so that everybody in the world wants them, and then keep them. That's really what you've got to do. But it's hard. All of those pieces have to work together.
Cindy, let me ask you a question. Going back to Uber, I agree with everything you're saying about the employer's responsibility for development, but what happens at a company like Uber or Lyft when the bulk of the workforce are gig workers? Where's the incentive for the employer to develop them and bring them along?
So let me back up, Mark. When I say develop them, you know, it's funny. That's probably not the right word to use. It's really allow them the opportunity to develop themselves, right? Because I believe that's really more about more what needs to happen. You're not responsible for developing them, but you are responsible to allow them to develop for themselves. And my husband was actually an Uber driver for a while, because we moved to Kansas City and he didn't know anyone. And it was a very interesting way to get to know the city. But a lot of times Uber drivers do what you just described. And I was with one in Memorial in Houston, and he took people to work to the airport to get stock tips. I mean, I think it's how you use the opportunity that Uber gives you to develop whatever. I mean, you might be developing your next business, or you might be developing whatever. But if you're innovative enough and the opportunities exist, which Uber does, if you're creative, you can develop yourself. And actually, that's what we did at Enron. We had very little training. We just kind of said, hey, you're hired. We think you're great. Have a great career. And here's all the ways you can develop yourself. And then people were able to post for jobs and move and into new businesses as they decided they wanted to do that. So, you know, it's not really I don't think it's the corporation's responsibility to develop them. I think it's their responsibility to give them the opportunities to move around. And if they, like I was an accountant, and then I was in contract administration, and then I was in community relations, and then I was in HR. That if they want to do that, let them do it. Let them develop themselves so they've got this amazing resume.
Great conversation. Thank you for that. But yeah, it's definitely a change in a philosophy that we are seeing, and supported by that then is, you know, the technology, if you would. And so being in the collaboration zone, we would be remiss if we didn't geek out on this topic for at least a couple of minutes. But of what is out there, what have you seen that really have been game changers for employers? Where is the innovation happening? You know, Mark, you and I were talking a little bit last week about you had you see a lot and you pay attention to the space, and some stand out more than others. Any thoughts along these lines?
Yeah, I think the ones that really stand out, and I'm not talking about a particular product, but maybe how a product is used. The companies that do this best are the ones who look at the employee experience at all levels. So from, getting from the parking lot or the train to the office, to how they're able to take time off, what kind of flex time do they have, all of those kinds of things. Those companies tend to make smart decisions about their technology that they're using for performance management and such. So I think it's really got to be something that sort of infuses the whole employer, the whole organization. Otherwise, you get pockets of effectiveness, but you don't get the whole workforce having a good experience.
Right. Cindy, thank you. What have you seen that has
Well,
been...
I guess when I saw this slide, Marilyn, I asked the question to myself, like, what one area that I have searched and searched and searched for some innovative technology around, which I don't know that there is one, and I'd be very interested to know if anybody's ever seen it. I think there's not a great technology that integrates into the whole kind of employee HCM that allows a company to utilize the talent they already have in their organization and understand the skills they have, the soft skills they have, what people really want to do as far as their future. There's not a technology that does that. And I've been asking for this. Is there one for 6 years? If somebody knows one that really allows you to utilize the current talent that you've got in your organization, I really want to know. But that's been on my mind a lot because of the fact that everybody's trying to find new talent. My big question is, are you utilizing the talent you've got? And if you are, how do you do that? And I'd love to know.
I think Plum.io, Plum Assessments does that. I think that's what they're.
And have it actually automated so that you can see all the people that want to do certain things, the skill sets. You're looking for someone in India, say, that you need whatever skills, that is willing to go do that, and that you could somehow automate that so that you can see your candidate list.
Yeah, this is the holy grail, right?
And it is.
It's I'm going to steal a line from Jason Aberbrook, who's the co-founder of LeapGen, but he said LinkedIn knows more about your people than you do.
That's right. Exactly.
Right?
And that's what I've said before. What about an internal LinkedIn or being able to pull that somehow? But no, he's right. He's right.
Right. And then you've got companies like Eightfold, right, that are, are they, is it enough? Right. And Katrina, to your point, like assessments. So we have all of these point solutions that are inch wide and maybe a mile deep, but the complete picture, along these lines. One of the things that's kind of interesting is, obviously paying attention to what the big system of record vendors are doing, right? And it seems like they have fits and starts along these lines, like SAP as one example, having spent a decade in that ecosystem. When they bought Qualtrics and now they've sold that off again, but that was a very interesting, potential game changers. And then they rebranded the acronym of HCM, Human Capital Management, to be HXM. And I think the person behind that was Amy Wilson, at least what I saw from outside. And then Oracle has now just announced, right, their solution to employee experience, which is a product they're calling Me. And so Yvette Cameron and Shannon Fisher and the team that are there have actually been really, really busy. And what they're doing is they are including this concept of listening. Radical concept, huh? Listen to your people, It's not just like a pulse survey once a year, right? Or once a quarter that gets compiled and then is already obsolete. It's how do you incorporate continuous listening into this equation? So I don't know if anyone else has anything they wanted to add into this in terms of game changers. It'd be interesting to get your thoughts if you have any inspirations.
Marilyn, one other point I want to make, because I'm hearing this a lot, is that it's hard to have a solution when the experience is so different for each person. And when you said listening, yeah, you want to listen, but you got to listen to every single person because it's different. What they want is different for each person.
Yeah.
And so, that's hard to figure that out from a technology standpoint when you've got to, and I'm starting to see that in the medical field. We're doing something different this year. I'm partnering with some medical providers, innovation in healthcare, and they're seeing this big time. They have got to figure out how they tailor everything they do to each person individually. But I think you have to do it from an employee experience or worker experience standpoint too.
Yeah, and speaking of innovation, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about virtual reality. So what are people thinking about this? I mean, we're going to be wearing devices, and what value is this bringing to our world?
I am such a convert.
Yeah.
I was very skeptical about VR, and then Striver sent me a headset with some of its courses, with some courses on it, and it was incredible. Training for an aircraft mechanic is all set on the tarmac. Training for retail employees is all set within a store, and the user basically is going through a scenario to try to figure out what's the right thing to do in different situations. It's easy to use. It's easy to use. It's comfortable to wear. The biggest downside is that if you're sitting in your chair, you're starting to make all kinds of goofy motions because your body just wants to sort of do these things. But I think it is really going to change training and development. It's just going to be too effective not to.
Mark, I agree. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Rayanne. I attended a company meeting with Humanly, and we were in the VR space for our retreat. It was really interesting, and there were a couple of folks that, due to vertigo or some other issue, they weren't able to attend, but they were still able to see. They kind of could live in that space and see what was going on with those that were in the VR space. It was really interesting, and I think the employees felt a different kind of connection following that experience. When you're talking about a fully remote team, it was really, really interesting. And everybody kept saying afterward, when are we going to do it again? When are we going to do it again? It just was a really great, different way to connect in the world that we have today.
And I think it's more sophisticated than people realize. One of the Striver applications was training to interview a candidate or an employee, have a discussion with them. And what the application does is, if the person asks you a question, or you ask a question, the animated figure sitting across the table from you spits back what the essence of what you've said, not word for word. It's not just replaying a tape, but it feels like a very natural conversation, and can be very effective, I think, for training managers and how to deal with employees or conduct interviews or what have you. So, these manufacturers, I think, are looking way ahead of what's possible now. The interesting thing to see will be what happens with Meta. Is that really going to take off? Or if it does, I think it'll spur a whole lot of development. If it doesn't, it'll hold it back a little bit. But I think that's something we should all be keeping an eye on.
Cindy, what do you think?
So I'm working with a company that actually came through our ESA WorkTech advisor group called Thrive 360, and they're using virtual reality for mental health and around anxiety and a lot of the stress related things from a male behavior standpoint. So I've gotten really interested in this, and I think that it's definitely the future. I also believe that, I think back to when we had nap rooms at Enron. I know that sounds weird, but we encourage people to go take a nap. I think ultimately, just from what I'm seeing in the things that Thrive 360 has, you might be able to take your own little 5-10 minute vacation to the beach or to the mountains or to where your happy place is, and not necessarily take a nap, but take a VR immersive experience in, where you relax and you love to, be. So I've been joking around, you'll be able to take vacations all over the world just by putting on a headset, right? And so, the sky's the limit as far as how companies use that. I agree with Mark, it's going to be training for sure, but I do think there's also other ways that they're going to creatively and innovatively use this virtual reality.
Right. I mean, we think about, we talked, Cindy, you brought up a word before that's just really resonating, is this idea of empathy. And that in order to have a better worker experience, we're going to have to learn a lot of the ways that we've been approaching work and put new systems in place. And then how do we teach this? How do we teach empathy to leaders or new leaders and managers? What's the change behind this? And can we potentially use virtual reality to go through some simulations that give the equivalent of an experience? Mark, just like, you're on the tarmac and you're learning a hard skill. What about how we can do a better job of soft skills in safe ways that can give us experience and really support the business that way? It's interesting. I have to admit, I'm a skeptic as well, and now I'm like really intrigued. I want one of these devices. So but yeah, in the area of mental health and wellness and really doing a much better job at that, there's so much untapped potential here. So we are, I think, probably coming up pretty close to the top of the hour, and that will be when my carriage turns into a pumpkin. But let's since we're talking about the future, let's skip ahead here and talk a little bit about predictions. Where do you think, if we think about the future, is there anything that you can think of today that might be not so normal, but perhaps you're hoping will be the future of work, the future of what we consider standard practice? What radical changes are going to happen, do you think?
I think to start, this whole notion of receiving information within the flow of work through applications like Slack or Teams, I think that's going to become a much bigger wave than people realize, to the point where I think it could really impact the approach of a lot of the HR technology vendors. Integrations figure into this because more of those vendors are basically distributing their capabilities to our workforce through Slack, through Teams, through similar products. It's kind of been quietly growing over the last year and a half, but I think that as we get back to something like normal, it's going to accelerate.
Right.
Marilyn,
Yes, Cindy, what do you think?
Well, my hope is that we don't get back to normal, that we allow employees to kind of figure out how they want to work and where they want to work, and let them be adults, and not focus on what I always call the FaceTime, but focus on the results and be able to measure results rather than seeing someone in the office. I think we're a long ways from that. I think companies still want to have their pulse on the employees and be able to see them and touch them. And I think that the companies that figure that out are gonna be more successful. And and not necessarily have to have employees to do the work, but have people that really, really want to do the work, no matter if they're an employee, they're a contractor, they're a freelancer, whatever, but allow, you know, that workforce, or that workforce be very diverse and the kind of skills and talent that a company needs. And so I've been trying to say to people, I don't want to go back to normal. I want to stay in a world where people can really thrive and do the work the way they want to do it and do the work they love.
It's really a wonderful sentiment.
Yeah, I totally agree. Normal should die. Should die a quick death and we start over again.
Right. It's you know, redefining what that means. And so love the sentiment. I'll put my 2 cents in here. I would like to see us get to a 4-day work week. Yay! All in favor?
Marilyn, you know what's so bad about that is when I started working at Pizza Hut years ago, one of my first jobs back in the 70s,
Yeah.
we had a 4-day work week. Way back then.
Wow.
And you're right. Why don't people do that? I mean,
Right. You know, my 5-day right now is self-inflicted, but it's, you know, but really it's, I have this fantasy about, you know, it's kind of like the week in the US between, you know, Christmas and New Year's. Everyone just like stops, and we almost have, if we all did it together. But yeah, having that, being able to refresh, because we're in this always on world. And when do we get the downtime? Do we, or is it 5-minute vacations? You know, how do we clear, how do create space for better decision making? You know, and again, this is a white collar problem here, but yeah. Anyone else have any crystal ball? Let's see, mine's floating around my office here somewhere. Any crystal ball predictions here on the future? What it could be aspirational, but what do you hope would be normal? That's not.
I'm totally embedded in this one,
Okay.
but McDonald's many years ago treated the process of recruiting and onboarding candidates to the point that they knew their employees would only be there for 3 months. So while it's definitely a business term, but their goal is to get the most positive ROI out of that employee while they're there. And we are going to see that change. The shift gig economy companies have already proved that out. And we need to automate the entire process as much as possible, still making it human. But we've got to get away from that timeline where it takes 7 days to hire somebody to work on a line when all they have to do is breathe.
Right. Faster decision making, right?
Well, it's going to be a whole bunch of automation too.
Right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I think we've gone over by a minute.
Yeah, I think-
Thank you.
Right.
Just a word of thanks to both Cindy and Mark and Ward for putting this on, and also for everybody else who added to the conversation today. It was really helpful and insightful. So back over to you, Rayanne.
Great. Thank you, MPH. And of course, thank you, Cindy and Mark. What a great way to start off today with a brilliant discussion. So many things. I think we could probably have spent the whole day talking about your bullet points, Marilyn.